We've got Neal Galehouse from NCPP, and he's going to present us with an update.
Thanks, Chris. Just going to give a brief update on the EMTSP web-based training program. I'd like to start out with a look through the history of how this came about and where we're at today. The idea for the web-based training program really started at the 2014 National Equipment Conference, where a number of potential training topics were identified. The following February, EMTSP made an application with the AASHTO TC3 to host 2 courses on the TC3 website under a scholarship. In June of that same year, the EMTSP received word that a scholarship was awarded. In fall of 2015, 2 courses from the list of potential training topics from the national meeting were selected and approved for development. In 2016, a second round of training topics was solicited, and in April of 2017, after completion of the first module, a memorandum of understanding was entered into between EMTSP and TC3. That MOU is what gave agencies access to the courses that were developed on the TC3 website for free. In late 2018, a third round of topics was solicited. Early this year, those topics were selected pending funding authorization by the regional partnerships. Since that time, each of the partnerships have had a vote and decided to authorize funding, so there is contribution made by equal contribution made by each of the 4 partnerships towards development of future training content. So to date, we've completed 4 training courses. The 5th is under development now, and we've identified a 6th course for development. This is what the first course, Preventative Maintenance Concepts, looks like on the TC3 website. The content is narrated. There's text available on the right side of the page that people can follow along. The agency should be able to log in for free. It's the domain name of your agency email address that allows you to access the course, so it has to be through your work email, not a personal email. But if there's issues logging in, please let us know and we can try to make sure that you're able to get access. I also had a conversation with Tim Cunningham last month about developing a brief video tutorial on the EMTSP website that kind of talks people through this login process and make sure that they're able to find the content once they're logged in. So look for that probably in another month or 2. If there's any issues, that tutorial will be there to help you find the content. So just to quickly run through some of the major topics that are covered in these courses, starting with preventative maintenance concepts. We look at the fundamental preventative maintenance principles. We talk about basic elements of a preventive maintenance program. That's really discussing a number of scheduled and proactive activities that are focused on inspection, maintenance, and repair of equipment to reduce the possibility of a breakdown or accident. Talk about basic fleet supervisor and technician responsibilities within the program. We look at advantages and disadvantages of the various maintenance models, which are preventive maintenance, proactive preventive maintenance, reliability-centered preventive maintenance, and then reactive maintenance. We looked at fleet management systems to capture operating data. So whether it's using a sophisticated software or spreadsheets, people need to be aware of the cost of those systems, both upfront costs and time to capture the data, as well as what data is being captured, and then key performance indicators for the program. And then finally, we looked at measuring and analyzing PM programs. So no matter how much data is collected, there's no use to it if it's not analyzed and used to improve the process. Looking at our benchmarking and best practices course, topics covered here include fundamental concepts of performance management. Talk about performance metric categories, and those are really your activities, your day-to-day operations that are carrying out that mission. your inputs, and finally your outcomes, which are really the most important piece. Looked at identifying appropriate performance metrics, so aligning those measures to organizational goals. You can't be out measuring everything, so you need to prioritize what's important. Talked about identifying performance metric targets, what values are acceptable. We talked about internal and external benchmarking, so both being able to look at comparing different operating units within the agency as well as comparing public sector to the private sector. What to do with benchmarking data, using that information you gather and be able to inform leaders within your organization, stakeholders, legislators of the job you're doing and where you're trying to go. Talked about the limitations of benchmarking data. For example, trying to have an apples-to-apples comparison where possible. We gave an example of fully burdened labor rate. You know, those values are going to be all over the board, so how good of a comparison are you really making? And then finally, we looked at identifying fleet best practices. Moving on to our third course, establishing core equipment complements and optimal sizing of state equipment fleets. We look at an overview of the optimization process. We talked about identifying the right equipment matrix for the intended operation. So this starts with a look at the equipment types and numbers needed to meet those mission critical activities at a prescribed level of service. About identifying an equipment condition assessment program, so inspection of equipment to identify repair and maintenance work, a system of quantifying remaining service life, prioritizing repairs, and cost estimates. Advantages of leasing, renting, and other alternative sourcing of equipment. So not everything needs to be owned, you know, particularly when you're talking about assets that are not part of those core mission activities. About the benefits of rebuilding and retaining long design life, heavy-duty equipment. Finally, we looked at fleet replacement funding mechanisms. So we're discussing options like cash purchase, revolving fund, debt finance, guaranteed buyback, surplus asset sale proceeds, things like that. Our fourth course, equipment utilization, topics covered here. We're looking at the importance of managing equipment items like depreciating assets. You know, vehicles need to be replaced at the optimal economic point. When that point is exceeded, there's increased frequency of mechanical failure, downtime, decreased reliability, which results in more assets needed to carry out the mission. We looked at minimizing asset lifecycle cost, various approaches to managing utilization, fleet size, and composition, purchase justification, ad hoc fleet sizing studies, utilization performance review, things like that. We discuss fundamental elements for utilization review and management. We look at importance of developing baseline of equipment types, classes, and numbers to perform mission-driven functions and activities. And this is having an understanding of what the core activities are to carry out the mission and desired level of service. We look at importance of performance metrics in communicating successes and challenges. And this is important to tell the story of where the agency is being successful, where challenges lie, what corrective actions need to be taken. Finally, we looked at the role of a well-managed utilization program in a predictable equipment replacement program. So to do this, you need to have a stable level of funding rather than being up and down, being able to maintain an appropriate mix and quantity of equipment that's work-ready and in place. So moving on to the course that's currently under development, equipment specifications. Some of the topics we'll be covering in this course. We're looking at recognizing the different specification types and when to use each. So we're talking about design specifications, performance specifications, and hybrid specifications. Take a look at understanding state procurement and ethics laws. You know, what does the state require when procuring assets? What rules and practices are in place to ensure fair and open competition and ethical behavior? We'll be looking at specification writers' need to research, utilization, application, attachment and accessories, technology, equipment requirements, and so on. We're talking about specification document components and the importance of grammar, punctuation, organization, and the absence of ambiguity in developing these documents. So I want to take a minute to talk about where we go from here. We continue to develop content for these web-based training courses, and thinking about where we want to be, think about having the end in mind. When we develop these, are we interested in there being a course certificate that's set up through TC3 where somebody goes in and takes the course and they receive a certificate at the end? Or are we looking to go a step further and think about a certification program where this material is a prerequisite to sit down and take a written exam, where you're ensuring that knowledge transfer has taken place and that people have these competencies you want them to have as good agency employees. So talking a little bit about potential for a certification program, I'm going to talk a little bit about one that's used through another technical services program on the pavement side. But the one they use is a voluntary program for the agency. And then these training courses that are being developed are used as prerequisite training material to sit and take the exam. And as I said, it ensures that those employees have the knowledge that they're supposed to have. So in the AASHTO TSP2 program, their certification was initiated back in 2016. It's specific to the type of treatment they're placing. And it's a written exam that's 50 to 80 questions, and they're true, false, multiple choice questions. 70% scores needed to pass the exam, and these exams are offered in person or they're given through a consortium of college testing centers, which there's several in most states that people can walk in and somebody can proctor an exam. So if you've got somebody that needs to retake a test or miss the opportunity to sit for exam, there's an easy option out there that people can go in and take these exams. On the TSP2 side, there's a database that's maintained of people who passed the exam. It's searchable. Anybody can go in and see who's been certified. The people who pass are also issued a card that they have with them that they can show they've passed the exam. And then the certification is valid for a specified period of time, and after that's expired, they need to be recertified. So thinking about possibilities for EMTSP, if there's interest in a certification program, maybe that's a general certification for everybody at the agency. Maybe that's one that's specific to certain roles. Maybe there's a different exam for a fleet manager versus an analyst or supervisor. All things to consider going forward. That's all I have. Is there any questions about the training program or certification possibility? We're working on the 5th one now.
Okay.
We should be sending the first lesson over to the education committee within probably the next week or two. So it's going to be probably early next year when 5 is completed and approved, and then it'll probably be a few months after that when it's available on the TC3 site. So 6 will definitely be sometime in 2020. That is the equipment specifications course. And the next one is, after that, procurement and disposal. Thank you.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.